Hi everybody, welcome to the back room of the studio today, where we're going to talk all about getting back to basics and prepping and caring for your flowers. This is so important to the longevity and the vase life of your flowers. And there's a few little tips and tricks that I've used over the years some that I've learnt in my studies and in books, and also other things that have just been really helpful for me learning along the way. So I'm going to share a few of those with you today. Okay, first of all, let's talk about just general care of your flowers once you get them home, either from the grower or the florist, or if you're foraging. Always get asked, should we put sugar in the water? Should we put bleach, a penny, lemonade, soda, vodka? All of these things. It never never ceases to amaze me how many things that people have heard and little ideas that have come across. But for me, the best thing for your flowers is clean water. Really, and I know I talk about them like little people most of the time, him and hers, and that's really how you have to think about your flowers. Would you like to be drinking filthy water 3 or 4 days in? Not so much. So just think about them like humans and care about them in that way. They're a living thing, and they're, in your home and in your home space to give you so much joy. So taking the time to care for them a little bit while you're making yourself a cup of tea, recut and change the water. So let's talk about that. Firstly, recutting your stems. Even if your flowers have sat in your car or on the bench or anywhere for even 5 minutes, they start to seal over their ends so they can absorb and make sure that they don't lose any more moisture than they have to. So it only makes sense then, if you were to pop them straight in water, that it's like a blocked straw. They just can't drink up enough water, and you'll find that they have droopy heads. The heads being the most weight, the heaviest part of their body, just like us. So recutting the stems is essentially on an angle and just cutting the ends like that. Now, the reason being that we cut our ends on an angle is nothing more scientific than just creating a larger surface area for the flower to drink from, okay? Popping them straight into cold, fresh water. There's no need to put anything in the water. What you do need to make sure, though, is that your vessels are clean, your vases are clean. Any bacteria in that water is going to turn the water off quicker, and then consequently, your flowers won't last as long. The other thing that we need to do is think about changing the water every 2 or 3 days. Now, if you just think about it every second day, you'll take your flowers out of the vase, tip them out, fresh water, recut the stems just a tiny bit, pop them back into fresh water. It makes a massive difference if you do that. Another little tip is to not have your flowers next to your fruit bowl in your house. Fruit exudes ethylene, which in turn turns your flowers off a little bit quicker, so it shortens their vase life. Just as you would put, an unripe avocado next to your fruit bowl where your bananas are, and your avocados ripe in a day, that's exactly what the effect that happens on flowers as well. So it just quickens their life process, I suppose. And of course, that's not what we want to do. We want to make them last as long as we can. The other tip is also not to have them next to your TV. I don't know what it is about TVs, but electronics seem to exude something that tends to turn your flowers quicker as well. So somewhere, obviously somewhere where you can view them and you can enjoy them and love having them around, but not in direct sunlight, not in drafty breeze kind of ways, or under a direct light from a window in the sun, and obviously not next to your fruit bowl. Okay, so changing the water every couple of days and recutting the stems. Now, there's a few little flowers that like a little bit more attention. The other, element that turns your water off a lot quicker is any of the foliage below the waterline. So we want to make sure that we strip the ends of our flowers. So roses are a really good example of that. So you can see that, and amongst the thorns as well, you can see that there is leaves here that would be below the water level, so we don't want that. This is, you may remember in my tools video, I showed you a rose stripper. So this is how we use that. Obviously to remove the leaves, but also in this instance to also get rid of all those thorns that, especially these, you know, gorgeous David Austin roses are notorious for their thorns. So you just pinch the stripper to the edge of the stem, along the stem, and just gently strip them down. So when they pop into the water now, give that another little recut, they can go straight into the vase without any foliage. Do that with everything, not just roses. So anything below the waterline, no foliage. Let's talk about scalding. So scalding is notoriously or traditionally used as a treatment for woody stems. So things like hydrangea, roses, sunflowers especially. So anything that has a large woody stem that maybe can't draw up enough water. So if you've ever found that you've received, maybe you're lucky enough to receive a lovely bunch of, you know, a dozen red roses or something like that in the past, and you'll see that two maybe heads start to droop really quickly within a day or two, they're not trying to, you know, jump off the cliff and finish their life sooner than the others. They're simply not getting enough water absorption up to their heads. So if you do this treatment and scald the ends, it essentially releases any air bubbles that are in the stem, and it also allows the water absorption to be much quicker and more effective. And you will find that if you get on top of that within a few hours or half a day, you won't even be able to tell which rose was actually getting soft. They will just perk straight back up. Okay, so this is a treatment that I use on, as I said, mostly wooding stems, but there is exceptions. Carrot flower responds really well to this as well. Lavender, even though it's quite fine, it does respond very well to scalding. And something you might be a little surprised about, because totally goes against the whole, you know, woody stem category, is poppies. Super soft stems, but you will find that when you purchase your poppies that the grower will have already scalded the ends, and you'll see that they are usually a brown or olive green colour, and that's a good thing. That means they've been scalded already, and that helps again. You know, there's a lot of energy that goes into a poppy to go from this little gorgeous furry bud to actually explode and full, you know, into this gorgeous little crepe flower. You know, it takes a lot of energy for that. So they need a lot of water absorption to do that. So how do we scald? Okay, get yourself a bucket or a container, and I've boiled the kettle. So simply just boiling your kettle, hot water as if you're going to make yourself a cup of tea, and just enough, say this much in the container. And we're going to do this with our little hydrangeas. So a cut, pop them in the hot water. You might do this with your rose stem. We could do this with our carrot. So it doesn't matter that they're all in there together. So I do that with my carrot as soon as I get it home. You can see that there's a couple of little pieces there. They're a little soft now in the heat today. So I could re-scald them, pop them back into fresh water, and they'll all perk back up. About 30 seconds or so, just enough to, it's essentially like blanching carrots. It just softens the capillaries in the stem so that the water can absorb quicker into, you know, up the stem to the head. Straight back into cold water. And you'll find that within half an hour to an hour, they'll perk right up, and they'll last so much longer for you. So have an experiment with that. That is a technique that I use a lot. And if I've got anything that I've bought or I've picked that tends to get soft, especially during the summer months, you know, quicker than it should, within sort of a short period of time, then I always just give it a practice and an experiment with scalding, and just to see how it goes. So there's another technique that might seem a little bit strange that works very well for hydrangeas. Also, any of your orchids, especially the orchids that you're buying from Asia, the Vanda orchids, Singapore orchids, things like that aren't traditionally grown in Australia, respond really well to this technique, and that's called drinking through the face, which is basically giving them a swim and dunking their heads in water. So why I like to do that with my orchids as well is that when the imported orchids come in, they're not traditionally sprayed, but they are, dirty. They're a bit jet lagged. They've been on a plane. They've got old water in their little vials. So I get that off, give them a recut, and then lay them in a bath. I've got a plastic tub, and I just give them a zhuzh around in the bath for about a minute or so, and then pop them in water. And they come from a humid environment. They come from a really wet environment, very different to here. So by doing that, it's kind of creating their really little own ecosystem of humidity, and it just freshens them right up. But we also do that with our hydrangeas. Now, if you're a hydrangea fan, and if you're a grower of hydrangea, you're probably a lover of hydrangea, but you also will know that they can be very temperamental once picked and put into a vase. They can often just collapse very, very quickly. There are a couple of tips on that. Always pick them first thing in the morning. That's when all of your flowers, anything you're picking from the garden, especially if it's a flower head, roses, anything like that, they're all like us, much fresher in the morning, hydrated from the cool temperatures of the night before. And obviously in the afternoon, they're all feeling a little bit tired after being in the sun all day. So early morning pick for hydrangea, bring them inside and dunk their little heads in water. Not for too long, just gently give them a little, and they'll be a little waterlogged. You can do that actually after you scald them. So you might scald them, give their heads a little dunk in the fresh water, and then just pop them in a bucket or a vase just to let them dry. And honestly, that makes such a difference. They just absolutely perk right up after that. That really, it would be my go-to treatment for hydrangeas and orchids. Okay, so just the last couple of things to finish. Make sure that you're using really lovely sharp cutters and secateurs when you're cutting your plants and your flowers and your stems. If you're using something that's a bit blunt, it tends to squash the stems together and again defeats the purpose of them being able to absorb a lot of water. Cleaning your vases, I get a lot of questions about that. I mean, traditionally back in the day, we used to use a capful of bleach, which, is not an ideal chemical to be using, and then tipping it out somewhere. It's not ideal. And to be honest, it's not that effective. I've been using white vinegar, scrubbing brush on all my buckets, and then a vase. As you know, white vinegar brings them up really beautifully and clean. So just a little capful of white vinegar, water, shush it around, give it a wash, dry them on the sink, and your vases will be crystal clear, ready for your next arrangement. Now, in regards to disposal and taking care of your design over the period of time, if you've got a mixed bouquet in a vase, you will find obviously some flowers tend to just live on and on and on, and others finish within a 3 or 4 day period, which is totally fine. It's the general cycle and nature of flowers. So as you're going through that process of recutting, changing the water, just go through that bunch and remove any that are old. What that does is that the older they get, then of course they're putting bacteria in the water, which is then turning your longer lasting flowers off much quicker. So remove any old stems, remove any old flowers, and you can essentially then extend the life of those other flowers for much longer, and you'll end up having this ever-evolving bouquet in your vase at home. Disposal, all of my flowers are natural, not dyed, not treated, as locally grown as possible. So of course, they're perfect for the compost. So if you do have wires on any of your flowers, essentially wires that we use in floristries will biodegrade as well. They'll just rust and just go back into the earth. The only thing you would need to be careful of is elastic bands. which I remove before I put them in a vase anyway, or any other sort of plastics. You want to make sure you get rid of all of that. I have to say my pet hate is when I had the shop was when I used to deliver bouquets to essentially probably a family member, so that, you know, I would see the bouquet after it got to its recipient, and they would leave all the wrapping on and pop the flowers in the vase with all the wrapping, and I'm like, it's really just there for presentation and to protect the flowers. Get rid of all that plastic. Let the flowers breathe. Let them get into that water and drink as much as they can. So as much as everyone loves the wrapping, remove the wrapping, save the wrapping if you want to, save all the ribbons, but let those flowers be loose and open in that vase, and they will last so much longer for you. Okay, I hope that's dispelled a few myths and given you a few tips that will make your beautiful bouquets that you make next time last so much longer and keep your flowers super, super happy. So until next time, I'll chat to you soon. Am I ever going to remember this? Pop any questions that you have or comments in the comments box below. I'm loving everything that's coming through, loving chatting to you in there. And no doubt you've got an old wives' tale or two about looking after your flowers, and I'd love to hear them. Let's have a discussion about that. You know, vodka was the most recent one that I had a little giggle about, but all right, see you all soon. Bye.